I don't think that the people, the very, very, very few people who are fortunate enough to hang on to gold and silver through all of this will have to really be concerned or fear confiscation.
Also looking forward to where things are headed. Some people are trying to look into the crystal ball ahead and see what is likely to be the next environment we find ourselves in if we're seeing the demise of the U.S. dollar because so many countries are turning away from it. It's been used as sanctions, etc. Second question is, if the Fed were to issue a digital dollar, a central bank digital currency, will it be backed by precious metals?
Yeah, I think it would have to be. Yeah, and I think the BRICS nations, to me, will lead the way. I mean, just recently we saw the employers and the unions have joined together in opposing the EU. This is European in Germany. The European unions and employers in large have joined together in opposing the EU ban on natural gas imports from Russia. This indicates that you're seeing a departure from the West and siding with the BRICS nations, Russia, China, India, South Africa, Brazil. We're beginning to see de-dollarization. We're beginning to see a departure from the dollar. And I think that if I had to guess, if they really wanted to turn it on, the BRICS nations, they would peg their currency to gold first. And with all the gold accumulated between Russia, China, India, South Africa, they have enough to do it like that. Ultimately, I do believe that, and we talked about this in March of 2020. I remember the first time we did it when Nancy Pelosi came out in her House Subcommittee Finance bill and said that viruses can live on paper currency. It was at that moment I knew we were ushering in the central bank digital currency. But what is a central bank digital currency? Even if it's denoted on a distributed ledger, it's still just fiat, backed by nothing. The only way that I think you'll get people back into the water is by pegging it to something. It's just like the fact that the Japanese Nikkei was 40,000 in 1980, and with interest rates at or near zero for the past 40 years, after such a massive crash in their market, they still are only 2/3 of what it was 30 years ago. You can't get people back into the water. No one trusts the system. It takes a whole new generation. And in this case, I think it will take a whole new system. And this is why they proactively and preemptively reclassified gold. So yes, if I had to guess, it would be a central bank digital currency that would be pegged to gold to a degree. Maybe they only peg 30% of it or 20% of it, not make it convertible, but peg it with the veracity of that peg and of the gold being held in Swiss vaults audited by the big three or whatever it is, all of it denoted on a distributed ledger. So that, to me, would be the best of both worlds, where you have the veracity of what's held, pegging it, and the ability of the immutability of the distributed ledger to hold the politicians in check, that they cannot do more than the distributed ledger or the gold on the distributed ledger would allow them to do. That's the only way I think you get people to jump back in.
Still looking into the future, and I know we're looking into an unknown, but as far as picking your brain as far as where your head's at around this topic, that same viewer asked a second question. And I think this is on the mind of a lot of people who've been basically pulling their chips out of the market, their dollars out of the bank, going to metals because they see that as kind of like the life raft to get them to the next, whatever the new system is. They will want to transact in the future, but they want to have a way of getting from here to that new place with their purchasing power intact. The question is, if the new central bank digital currencies will be backed by precious metals, would we be able to deposit our precious metals we hold today in exchange for precious metals backed cryptocurrency?
And these what-if questions are always very difficult to answer. The fact that it is tier one and the fact that if it were pegging it, yeah, maybe there would be a central bank window for you to deposit your gold into if you wanted. And I don't think that they would come after your gold. A lot of people think, well, you got to buy numismatics to protect yourself from confiscation. I like numismatics for other reasons. I don't buy them because I'm afraid of confiscation. I mean, in the back of my mind, that's a portion of it. I like numismatics because they're true pieces of Americana. They were currency used 100 plus years ago, and I just think they're a better way to own gold. But I don't think that the people, the very, very, very few people who are fortunate enough to hang on to gold and silver through all of this will have to really be concerned or fear confiscation. And do I think you would be able to turn it in? Probably your gold. I think they would. I don't see any reason why they wouldn't. I don't think you will be mandated to do so. And we've talked about this before. If they wanted to embark upon getting a whole bunch of gold and silver, they could just simply nationalize the ETFs, GLD and SLV. You got the second largest holdings of silver in the world, the iTrust, Silver Trust, held by JP Morgan, the biggest crook on the block. And you got HSBC being the custodian for GLD and the third or fourth or fifth largest stockpile of gold in the world, which would enable these people to, or the central planners, to take a whole bunch of gold and silver without breaking laws or infringing civil liberties. And the very few people, the pimple on the elephant, who hung on to their gold and silver, if I had to guess, there would be the ability for them to deposit their gold, probably. But here again, I don't know. And I think it's a good problem to contemplate, better than having all of your assets in dollars that are destined to ultimately go to zero. So, or become worth much less. I think that person's guess is as good as mine. But if I were going to guess, I would say, yeah, they probably would allow you to convert your gold into currency, the new currency of the realm, the new central bank digital currency.
I'd like to turn our attention, if we could, to a couple of viewers' questions that are about more factually based things rather than sort of predictions of the future. I think we know perhaps better answers that are specific about these things, because they're not talking about what might happen. They want to know what are the consequences of actions that they're taking right now related to precious metals. One is about tax consequences of selling or owning silver. Again, we're not individualized tax advisors, we're not individualized financial advisors, but there are some general rules of the road that do apply when owning or selling silver. One of the questions is, Nathaniel G. says, I'd like to learn about the tax consequences of owning silver. What are the tax consequences of selling silver shares, for example, SLV or PSLV, versus selling bullion or silver eagles?
Well, SLV and PSLV are apples and oranges, because SLV is a ETF. It's a proxy. And when you sell it, you're actually taxed as if you sold physical bullion at the 28% collectible capital gains rate. The biggest reason, if you're going to own paper shares, that I prefer PSLV to SLV, there are a few. Number one, it's run by Sprott. And in the world of paper, to me, they're by far the most trustworthy. It's held at the Royal Canadian Mint. You can say what you want about the Royal Canadian Mint. It is, to me, better than being administrated by JP Morgan, held at God knows where. But the biggest selling reason for it in terms of taxation is that PSLV is what's called a closed-end fund. So it's taxed at the regular capital gains rate, not the rate of 28% collectible. And the last reason is the redemption. You as an investor can never take money out of SLV unless you have an extremely large, what they call a basket. And I don't know how many millions of ounces that is. It's a lot. But at PSLV, it is backed by physical silver and you can redeem it. However, I do believe the minimum redemption in PSLV is 10 1,000-ounce bars. No choices other than 10 1,000-ounce COMEX bars. So you have to be able to redeem 10,000 ounces in bar form. But it's a closed-end fund, meaning you will be taxed at the capital gains rate rather than the ETF rate, which is taxed at the collectible capital gains rate of 28%.